Hi everyone, and welcome back to English 2. Today's video, I'm going to go into a little more detail about the graphic response assignment, just to kind of clear up some confusion and questions, and then I'll briefly talk about the blog post assignment and blog response assignment. So, the graphic responses, we have 3 of them over the course of the semester. They are based on a book by an author called Lawrence Musgrove. He wrote a book called Handmade Thinking, which is specifically kind of about how to use kind of art and creative work and such in pedagogy and teaching. And specifically, one of the exercises that he likes to use is to use visuals and art to respond to some kind of text. Obviously, I like this idea for this class because, one, it kind of gets us using some of that visual language that we've talked about in class or in discussion or that we've seen in our readings. And second, since one of our potential final projects is to create a comic of our own or some other kind of, sequential graphic narrative, then it gives you some practice for that. So that's kind of why I try to assign this assignment. It doesn't work quite as well when we're online as when we're in person, just because it's a little trickier to, scan things in or take camera photos of something and then email it, as opposed to just being able to hand in a piece of paper. But I do think it's useful enough for a course like this that I think it's kind of worth the inconvenience. So, what kind of parameters do I set? I'm actually going with the parameters that Musgrove sets in his own sort of graphic response kind of framework, which is he has these 21 different formats, and he bases them on different kinds of visual ways of representing information or ideas. So there's portraits, like portraits of a person. There's maps. You can create your own little comic. You can do comparison, contrast, or before, after. You can do Venn diagrams. You can do, seesaws, scales. You do a tree to represent something. A web, kind of organizational, kind of top-down, spreading out, or genealogical charts that are kind of bottom-up, spreading up. Bar graphs, pie charts, other kinds of graphs, timelines, equations, processes, a Freytag's pyramid, which you may be familiar with from English 2 or a previous course, the kind of plot progression pyramid. And then there's some others too, but basically there are a lot of different ways that you can represent ideas visually. And certainly some of those would be helped with actual traditional art skills. Some of them don't need that at all. And again, these responses are not necessarily being graded in any way or evaluated in any way on how much artistic skill they're showing. I am not the most amazing artist, as anyone who's been in my in-person classes and has ever seen me have to draw on the board can attest to. So I am not in the business of judging folks' art. What I'm assessing it on is this responding to one of our class texts, and what is this, drawing attention to or trying to say about that text? And beyond that, it's pretty open. So you can choose whatever text you want. You can choose whatever aspect of that text you want. If you want to focus on a particular character in the middleman, if you want to do something relating to understanding comics, if you want to do something relating to Ramadan, all of those are fair game. And you can definitely create a graphic response to any of those for this first assignment. Any of our readings up until that assignment is due. There are examples of graphic response assignments I've posted to that assignment sheet. They're not necessarily for this class. I do have examples. They're just not currently scanned in, so I can't necessarily show them to you. But definitely looking at those responses, those examples that he had, will give you an idea as far as how you might be able to use some of these formats, what you can do with them, kind of what you can use them to show or to argue or to point out. And so hopefully you'll find those examples helpful. You will visually, obviously it has to have visual elements. So this means you may or may not choose to use color, you may or may not choose to draw something. There are ways to create art without drawing. Like found art is a thing. So repurposing memes or something. Like taking a traditional meme and putting the text on it so that it's referring to our reading in a way that works with the meme. That sort of thing will work too. So again, you don't have to be able to draw. You really just have to be able to come up with something visual. Obviously, the easiest way for that is going to be to draw. But if you know how to create a pie chart or a pie chart or a bar graph, if you are familiar with a meme and that you'd like to kind of repurpose, if you have photos you want to use in a collage, or you want to work with some existing art, like I am not the copyright police. If you want to take existing art from the internet and repurpose it in some new way for this graphic response assignment, that's totally fair game. I will not come after you if you decide to use Batman art or something when we're talking about Batman. You can create it digitally or on paper. Obviously, if it's digitally, it's going to be pretty easy to submit. If you create it on paper, your best bet is going to be to either scan it if you have access to a scanner, or to take a phone photo of it if you have a phone camera. And then you can submit it to me via email. That's always acceptable. Via Blackboard, Dropbox. Either of those work. Worst comes to worst, let me know and I can give you my number so you can text it to me as an image. So however it is that you need to get this to me will work. One thing I would request is that when you create it, include your name, so I know whose it is, and include the name of the visual format you chose, so I know whether this is trying to be a portrait or a comparison contrast or a pie chart. Some of the times it's really visibly obvious, sometimes it's not. And the due date, just so I know which of the 3 assignments this is for. And then cite in some way the particular part of the text you're responding to. So if you're looking at all of a particular text, just say what that text is. If you're responding to a particular page or panel in Understanding Comics, give that page number. If you're responding to, a particular moment or a particular piece of dialogue, just let me know where I can find whatever it is that you're responding to. If you're responding to the whole text, obviously you just need to say, this is responding to, Understanding Comics or Anoska Nimuina. So, that is kind of the long and short of this assignment. Hopefully it seems a little clearer for those who have had questions. But in general, I think if you look at those graphic response assignment examples from Musgrove that I posted, it'll be a lot clearer as far as what it is that you're kind of going to be expected to do. And again, I realize it's a little inconvenient having to kind of turn these in digitally, especially if you're having to create them hard copy. I said we do only have 3 of them over the course of the semester, so I think there's one obviously due at the end of next week. There's another, I think fairly close to midterms / spring break, and then I think there's another about halfway, a little over, I think over halfway. I think that there's one after our final reading. So over the course of a semester, that seems pretty reasonable. So that's the graphic response assignment. That then brings us to the blog assignment. So one of the other big things we're graded on this semester, is going to be a class blog. And I've created the blog. I'm still getting the kind of bits and pieces worked out, but like we have a web address and such. And so what you're going to do is this is a blog that will be visible to people beyond this class. So keep that in mind as you contribute to it. This is something that people outside of Haskell will be seeing, and they will know that this is for Haskell English 218 comics and the graphic novel. So, at least you're representing Haskell when you do this. And the blog post, or the blog assignment, is basically you're going to write two blog posts over the course of the semester, and 4 blog responses. So, the posts are going to be a little more substantial. Those are going to be engaging in some way with something relating to comics or graphic novels or anything relating to our class. So anything that is about comics, anything that is about comics adjacent media, so things like comic book movies, all fair game. You can write about anything of that sort you want. If you want to write about, the Daredevil TV series, if you want to write about the comics like Saga, or, going with one that we will be reading later, Scott Pilgrim. If you want to write about something relating to the comics format and how comics work, all of that is fair game. As long as there's some, relation to comics somewhere. It's not just all pop culture. So, in the past, I've had students try to write about Red Dead Redemption, the video game, and I'd be like, yeah, that's not really, it's not a comic. It's not comics related. So, that said, if you wanted to do something about Lego Marvel Avengers, or Lego DC Superheroes, or Lego Batman or something, that is comics related. So you're good. So as long as you can draw a direct connection or even indirect connection to comics that way, you're set. So and even something like Red Dead Redemption would be fine if what you were doing was comparing it to a comic that you've read, or talking about how it is reflecting the same kind of attitude towards the Wild West that we see in Western comics of the 50s. I don't know. There's a lot of different ways you could go with that. But basically there has to be some tie-in to comics. So just make sure that there's this tie-in to comics. If you're afraid that something is a little too tenuous and you're not sure you can really make a case for it, email me about it and we can talk about it, and I can let you know, hey, that sounds like it'll be fine, or maybe rethink that and go with something a little more directly comics related. So, first of all, for those of you who are not familiar with blogs, they are essentially a web log, or a sort of web journal diary. That's how they started, and then obviously they became a broader category from there. In this case, a class blog is going to be a collaborative project where all of us will create content that we think will be interesting to an audience that cares about our topics. So our audience is folks who are interested in comics and the graphic novel. Your goal is going to be to create quality, meaningful content that contributes to that goal, or that contributes to that, audience's interest within this kind of blog system. So remember, the audience you're writing for is not yourself, it's not your classmates, it's not even me. It is that general public that may be interested in this class or in the things that we talk about, or the things related to this class. Do keep in mind, like I said, anyone can come along and read this blog. It will be public. And it seems like every semester I do this, there is at least one totally random non-Haskell person that follows the blog. So there is always at least one person who is not Haskell who is going to be looking at this. So just keep that in mind. And some of those random folks may read your blog entries, they may even post a comment responding to your ideas, and that's a good thing. It's exciting. It means like they're engaging with what you have to say. So, what should a blog entry contain? It can cover anything related to comics and graphic novels or media that's directly related to them. It doesn't have to be those that we're studying in class. So if you want to write about a particular manga that you think everyone should read, if you want to write about the process of adapting a particular comic into a particular movie or TV show, if you want to write about like your personal relationship to comics and how that's kind of evolved, all of those are fair game. Just make sure that you are contributing something new. So if you're writing about the same, say, comic as someone else, make sure you're bringing something new to the table. Don't just regurgitate the same things that they said. So if someone, like going off our readings in class, if someone decides that they wanted to write about, Dragon Ball and its popularity in Asia, not just in, Japan, then if you wanted to write about Dragon Ball, you could, but you would want to write about some other aspect, maybe a particular character, maybe something about like the merchandising or the animations based on it. Just make sure that you're doing something different, even if you're looking at the same text. And some ideas, obviously any of our readings are great to work with, and we'll obviously be working with those in class or in our discussion posts. Anything you haven't read for class but you've read for pleasure or fun. Anything, other kinds of comics that we may not be looking at in depth in class, things like web comics or newspaper comics. We are, we can look at those briefly. In fact, we are actually reading a web comic in the form of Super Indian, but we're just not reading it in the web comic form. But yeah, like all that sort of stuff, totally fair game. You can talk about like a comics genre we haven't studied. You can provide a new look at one of our primary texts. Practical end of things also works, since we will be potentially creating a comic at the end of this semester. If you have like drawing skills and you want to teach a useful drawing technique and talk about how it works in comics, that also works great. If you want to trace the development of a theme across multiple works, so if you want to look at, one of the ones that I think has kind of been gotten a lot of discussion recently is the way that comics has tended to link like women gaining power and that power driving them crazy. Most specifically with some of the discourse surrounding WandaVision and how it actually kind of refreshingly did not 100% do that the way that the comic storylines it's based on did. But obviously, there was also a Dark Phoenix saga movie. And so there are these particular stories in comics that repeat this idea kind of over and over. And it's kind of created a lot of discussion. So something like that would be the example of looking at a theme across multiple comics. And again, feel free to discuss comics adjacent media, such as film adaptations of comic storylines. All of these are fair game. Again, it's pretty wide open. As long as you can make some connection to comics, you're good. For help with the actual posting of the content to the blog, there will be a couple of Blackboard kind of worksheets, handouts. On one, using WordPress, which will tell you how to kind of sign up for a WordPress account, which is what you will need to contribute to the blog. And then blogging basics in terms of trying to help you figure out how to write about whatever it is you want to write about. Obviously, those don't answer your questions. You can definitely email me, and those should be going up at the same time the blog post assignment does. So I'd say look for those early next week. I will also give an example of another class's blog that deals with similar content. from another school. It's very outstanding. I would not say judge our work by theirs, because that is a 300 level class aimed at English majors who like specifically are like English is what they do. Theirs is a 300 level class, a junior level class. This is a 200 level class, a sophomore level class, so it's a lot more general, and it's a lot more open to people who are not just, focused on English. Like we have folks from, all different kinds of majors and, interest areas here. So the expectations for them are a little higher than they would be for this class. Nevertheless, I think it is helpful as far as giving you a good idea of what you might want to write about and how you might want to write about it. So that will be on the blog assignment sheet when it goes up. What else should a blog post contain? Basically, you want to explore a topic or question. So bring up whatever it is you want to talk about. Develop an idea or two, so have some things to say about it, and come to some conclusion. So end in some way that either kind of wraps up what you have to say and opens the floor to other folks, or wrap up with some kind of like, here's where I'm thinking, like what do you have to add? Does anyone else have, can anyone else shed light on this? At a minimum, we want to have in each blog post you write, first of all, a title. So you want to just call it blog entry number 1. At least one image, and I have kind of made this optional in the past because there's been some trouble with uploading images. I don't think that should be a problem this semester, hopefully. So I'm leaving that requirement in place tentatively. So at least one image, and it can be any kind of image relating to your post. So if you're writing about a kind of movie, a still of the movie is fine. If you're writing on a comic, a snippet of the comic from, Google Images is fine. If you're talking about like a particular text, just kind of bring something in from that text. It can be a panel, it can be a cover, just some kind of visual image that is related to your post. And then again, you want to make sure that you're original. So either you're looking at something other folks haven't, or if you're looking at something that other folks in the class have, you want to make sure that you're adding to that discussion by giving us something new. So that's kind of how the blog posts will work. The blog responses will probably be shorter. They can be, a couple of sentences. A blog entry should be like, a healthy paragraph or two. Blog responses can be short. They're not required to include images, but you should still have at least one kind of meaningful, substantive thing to say that engages with the content of the post you're responding to. So if someone is writing about, again, to go with my earlier example about how popular Dragon Ball is, not just in Japan, but throughout all of Asia, then your response could be, if you went to, China a couple of years ago and saw a ton of Dragon Ball merchandise. Like that would be something you could add to the conversation. Sort of saying, here's more evidence that this is true. If you want to add like something about how the popularity of Dragon Ball in America and maybe how that might be added on to the discussion of its popularity in Asia, that also works. Again, you've definitely got a lot of leeway as long as you come up with something that is related to what they're saying and that is responding to it or engaging with it in some way. So you can expand on ideas that they've introduced, like kind of take them further. You can offer something new that is related to the ideas expressed in the post, whether that's supporting what they're saying, whether that's contradicting what they're saying, or kind of giving evidence to the contrary, whether that is like just taking it in a different direction. All of those are fair game. And you can't even disagree with people directly. Like if someone is talking about how, the powerful women go crazy storyline is, a big issue and you don't think it is, you can bring that up in your response. You want to obviously back that up. Probably you won't want to just be say like, I disagree. You want to say why and how and on what grounds. But definitely respectful disagreement is okay. It's part of discussion. Part of conversation. And in addition, responses can also engage with other responses and they will still count. So if you have a conversation with someone and then they respond to you, that will count for like their post. So they post, you respond, and then they respond to your response. That will count as one of their responses because they're engaging, they are responding to someone else in the class, whether that's to a post or whether that's to a response. So your goal is 2 blog posts and 4 responses over the course of the semester. The first blog post is, I think, 2 weeks and change away, maybe 3. I can't remember exactly. The syllabus will have the exact date, and I'll remind you when we have it coming up. But for now, just know that the assignment sheet should be going up by early next week. So that is the graphic response assignment kind of explained, and the class blogging assignment explained. The handout, the kind of assignment sheet that you'll get for the blogging assignment will give the actual address of the blog, so you'll be able to visit it there. The reason I'm not giving it here is just because it's still, I haven't gotten it to the point. It's still got the placeholder stuff in place. So by the time you get the assignment sheet, it will be ready for contributions. So again, if you have any questions about either of these, feel free to email me or Blackboard message me, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can and answer anything that I can answer. And beyond that, for those of you in the area, I hope you are enjoying your snow day, sort of. We didn't get classes canceled, even though we had 6 inches of snow. But hopefully you're at least enjoying, being inside and warm on this day. For those of you who are not local, you may or may not have snow. So if you did get it, hope you're enjoying, being inside and warm with the snow outside. If you didn't, then hopefully you're still having a good day wherever you are. So I will see you in our next video.